We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
Nosotros crecemos cuando damos.
We grow when we give.
与えるとき、成長する。
We grow when we give.
Welcome to ROG, Return on Generosity. I'm your host, Shannon Cassidy. This podcast celebrates generosity at work, not financial giving valuable time, mutual respect, alternative perspectives, and genuine collaboration. Our special guest today is Tiffany Tavarez, who serves as Senior Vice President, Technology, Diversity, Community, and Sustainability, TDCS, at Wells Fargo. Prior to joining TDCS, Tiffany was SVP of Community Sponsorship and Strategy for Wells Fargo Advisors. Her career in inclusive philanthropy, program development and strategy, and stakeholder engagement has included reputable organizations such as Exelon, Comcast, which is where we met, Temple University, and Pew Center for Art and Heritage. She has earned numerous awards and recognitions. They will all be listed in the show notes. But this year alone, Tiffany was named one of Philadelphia's top women and top Latino power players by Metro Philadelphia, the 2023 Love Ambassador with Love Now Media, and the 2023 Marshall Memorial Fellow, MMF. Tiffany is a board member, a board chair. She is a co-chair of the Children's Scholarship Fund Campaign Committee. She's a first-generation college graduate who has earned degrees from both Temple University and the University of the Arts. What I appreciate most about you, Tiffany, and this is on a long list of things that I appreciate about you, are your boundaries. You are clear about what is okay and not okay, and you model what it means to have loving boundaries. Welcome to ROG, Tiffany.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that intro. And it's also really shocking to me that we met during my tenure at Comcast. That's blowing my mind. I thought I did not have a sense of time prior to this. Now it's just completely ruined whatever I thought I had left. So thank you for that.
I just feel like I've known you for decades, and then I look back and I'm like, actually, yes, in fact.
It's actually very long time.
You were a participant in a mentoring program back in the day. I can provide photos.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you'll have a big smile. Yeah, so we are kicking off the Latino Heritage Month series. So you're the perfect person to kick this off with me. Oh. You've also offered some great guests that our listeners will get to hear from later this month. So I thought it would be great for us to start with your background and really just take us all the way back so we can get a vision of, where did Tiffany Tavarez originate from?
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, first of all, just thank you so much for having me. It's so great to get reconnected on here. I'm a big Shannon Cassidy fan. So let's see. It's so interesting that I have such a strong affiliation, obviously, in my love and advocacy for Philadelphia. But I actually was not born in Philadelphia. Fun fact. I was born in New York City. I like to say I am 1.5, generation American because my mother was born here. My father was not. So my family actually comes from primarily Dominican Republic, as well as, of course, like everybody, right? We're like a really beautiful cocktail of a number of different places. On my father's side, I also have family from Haiti as well. And so when I started in New York City, I started primarily in the Bronx, and then moved to Washington Heights, and then from there to northern New Jersey. The one fun fact I like to share with everybody is that, when I meet people who are like really obsessed with showing me and talking to me about how difficult it was to find their phone case, right? Like their dream phone case, because there's so many options, and they get heartbroken when it breaks or when it gets ruined or something like that. And I'm thinking, the commitment that people have to these, kind of small, mundane things is really interesting. Because as someone that went to 9 different schools, I don't get attached to cell phone cases, right? And so I've attended 9 different schools prior to going to college. The longest place I'd ever been was actually in high school. I attended County Prep High School in Jersey City. I was in Jersey City at the time. And that was a really great high school in that I was able to move anywhere within Hudson County. So I continued to move even though I stayed at the same high school. And that was kind of like my one request to my mother, right? Like, please don't make me change high schools. At least that, please don't let me change high schools. And so that worked out really great. I have a younger brother by a couple of years. And so it was the three of us, right? The three amigos kind of going through life. And, my mother was, I like to say, both the hardest working woman I ever met, as well as my first employer that I did not get paid for the jobs in which I did in the household. So my brother and I are both actually first generation college students. I think it's really important to note because I was kind of moving ahead just by a couple of years. The first thing I did was turn around and teach him how to figure that out as well. And so the both of us have really taken on these new paths that have just really catapulted our lives into a different place. And that's what brought me actually to Philadelphia. I attended Temple University for undergrad, specifically their Tyler School of Art, which people always get really shocked when I mention that. I'm the first person Temple University ever gave a full tuition scholarship for the arts, for the visual arts. And, it's so funny. People always say, oh, so I decided, you decided to not go into the arts. I said, well, that was never my plan. I just know that I always consider myself a creative thinker. And that was just, the part of my brain that really excited me the most, that enabled me to really come up with solutions to problems, to just see things differently. And I thought going to art school would be way more better and just kind of cultivate that side of me versus business school. And from there, one of the things that fascinated me the most was actually how is it that people learn, right, outside of school? We really underestimate the impact of the way that people learn outside of school, whether it be community centers, churches, other nonprofits, rec centers, libraries, et cetera. And so that's what really inspired me to end up getting my master's in museum studies, focusing on museum education and how people learned outside of the classroom. And that's what brought me to University of the Arts. And I stayed here in Philly and kind of started my career from there ever since.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for that background. And I could see how that creative ability and that innovative way that you think has really, I've seen that in the parts of your career that I've had proximity to, but I also think that it's how you think, how you see the world. And although it must have been very challenging to have gone to so many schools as a young person, all that change and transition, it has also exposed you to a lot of different people. So you're talking about different people, different environments, and then you talk about different learning styles. So I just see that in your outlook in life. Is that true?
Oh my goodness, Shannon, spot on. There is no room you can put me in that I do not feel that I don't belong, that I don't feel like I can't talk to anyone in there. I mean, adaptability, I believe to be one of my strengths because, you have to figure every time you're in a new place, there's an opportunity to not just introduce yourself, but to reintroduce yourself, right? When you evaluate parts of you that maybe were not so great, you did not tell that story so well, or you really want to be known for a particular thing. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to Control Alt Delete, my last year, do this all over again and hit the refresh button. And then it, comes out stronger and better, hopefully each time. And then, when it comes to even when you figure the way in which people learn and share information, there were definitely some classrooms where I was more welcome than others. But nonetheless, I always say there's like a devil at every level, right? The difficulties of life never go away, but the training in which you deal with them, the training in which you react to them, if you decide to react, does just get better, more articulate and more refined. And then hopefully takes less of a toll as you move forward in your life.
Oh, I love that. That is so true. And the Nelson Mandela quote, which is, I either win or I learn.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I'm hearing you say that, right?
That's right.
I'm either going to win and get the thing that I thought I was here to accomplish, or I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn how I could do it differently, how I can adapt. So what are some of your early memories of that, Tiffany? Like where you were trying something, or maybe you were introducing yourself, or you were in a new environment where you started to get these life lessons of like, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up?
Yeah. Did I ever, I know we've talked, I feel like so many times, but did I ever share the story about when I got kicked out of art class?
No, let's hear that one.
Okay. So I'm talking about going back. This was very early. So I was in the third grade. We were in a class where we had like one free period every week. And during that period, it was kind of a range of just like activity. And so the teacher would tell us like, okay, this week is like art class, or this month is art class, right? So what that really entailed is that every student got a box of crayons and one sheet of white paper, just one. And you know how kids really get. They get really intense. You know, they draw on that picture. If it does not come out exactly as they want, it's ruined. They get upset. And the thing is, you don't get another sheet of paper. So, you know, I remember Sister Francis gives me a sheet of paper. I, of course, you know, quote, unquote, mess up. I get so upset. When I tell you I take it personally, I mean, you could have told me like, you know, I just ripped up the Declaration of Independence or something really dramatic. Like, so I remember going home and I was like, that's it. I got to practice every day. So my mom would bring home like, you know, white copy paper for me to like practice. It became like the art Olympics for me. I was just practicing every single day until the following week when I would get that one sheet of paper. I get the one sheet of paper and, you know, the crayons are in front of me. And I'm like, oh, it's go time. It is time to do this. So I draw this beautiful picture. I still see it in my head. There's a kind of a field of grass. There's a really, you know, kind of beautiful, big, lush tree. There's a fence. There's a dog running in the field. Then, of course, you know, the cherry on top is the sun in the picture, right, is wearing sunglasses. Because that's how bright the sun is, that the sun needs sunglasses.
That's how bright it is.
And I'm just there and I'm thinking like, oh my God, this is like creative genius working right now, y'all. So I have my head down and I'm coloring away. And then Sister Francis stands next to me and she says, what is this atrocity, right? Now, here's the thing. I'm in third grade. I don't know what atrocity is. The only thing I knew is that when adults use big words, it happens for one or two reasons. They're either impressed by you or you're in trouble. And I saw my picture and I assumed she was impressed. So as I'm coloring away, I start singing. This is my atrocity. This is my atrocity. I said, isn't this beautiful, my atrocity? Because I thought it was a compliment. And so I looked at her face and clearly she was not happy. And then again, she, you know, shouted, what is this atrocity? Now, here's the thing I didn't tell you about the picture. Kind of my creativity came in the way that I used color. So like my tree was pink, the dog was purple, you know, I think the grass was blue. So you can recognize everything. It just was, you know, in different kind of unique colors. I was making it my own. The teacher finally says, she actually slams her hand down and she said, you know, God did not make things to look like this in nature. You know, this is horrid, you know, start screaming. And then without hesitation, I was like, yeah, but God's not drawing my picture. And she shouted, the audacity. So she grabs me by the collar and starts to push me out from the back of the classroom. And you remember kind of back in the day, like the little desks, whatever, and everyone, you know, has their head down. And I'm just shouting at the top of my lungs, God gave me talent. I'm just trying to use it. God gave me talent. I'm just trying to use it. And at that moment, you know, the memory for me that sticks out the most, it wasn't my picture or even Sister Francis grabbing me. Like it wasn't any of that. But I always think about, almost every day I think about that classroom because no kid in that room had lifted their head up in judgment or even in agreement. And it was the first time I had witnessed fear give birth to indifference, right? And so for me in my work every day and what I choose to do and what I choose to say or not do, I always think, how am I going to get people to look up, right? There is so much in our world day to day that people, yes, they're active in terms of, you know, maybe they have a different opinion than you, a different outlook and feel differently, and that's fine. But guess what? At least they have energy, right? They are alive and there's something that matters to them. But there's so many more people that just have their head down. They're completely indifferent. They just could care less. They don't see it. They don't hear it. They don't feel it. And to me, that's the literal definition of a zombie. And I like to think of myself as a zombie.
Yes, indeed. Oh, I love that story. For the through line and for the moral of it, right? That experience actually made my stomach hurt to think about anyone judging a young person expressing their talent. But we know that exists at every age, unfortunately. So just thinking about the people with the heads down and the individuals who just don't say anything to help or to just let things happen, you know, this is Hispanic Heritage Month. We are aiming to broadcast and amplify voices where we can learn more about the shared experiences of individuals in this community. What could you share with us, Tiffany, from your life experience of maybe times where people were rude to you because of your heritage, or maybe the opposite of that, individuals who helped to amplify your greatness?
Yeah, no, that's very generous of you, pun intended. So there's a quote by an Irish author, Samuel Beckett, and he says, "Words are the clothes our thoughts wear." I think that how we speak to people, the words that we choose are so important. I think that sometimes we forget or at least don't realize how much they can impact, change, they can help or hinder someone's life. Okay. And so for me, I like to say I've had a plethora of verbal bombs that have been thrown at me throughout my life, both personally and professionally. Of course, I 110% can share all the beautiful things that people have shared. And I think that someone could resonate with that, right? Because it's a beautiful moving quote or a touching gesture, et cetera. But I also think it's really important to call out the things that people said that were not necessarily great, that were not right, that were intentionally hurtful, right? Because for me, I always say, okay, if I'm mentioning this, does it make people uncomfortable if I mention the opposite, right? It's almost like saying, oh, this is a really great woman leader, or this is a really great, Afro-Latino leader. Okay, that's great. But we're never going to say Joe Biden is a really fantastic, cisgender white male leader, right? That we're still centering a particular sometimes experience or identity and othering others. In that case, when we talk about, people who have been really phenomenal in our lives, again, personally or professionally, I love the fact that 100% we call them out, but we also call them out because the norm is not that. And so for me, I'm about calling out what's the norm in an effort to expose it. So that way we're actually really going to start to center what is right versus looking at that as an exception to the rule. So anyway, all that to say, I've had, oh my goodness, so many things I've heard. You shouldn't be so visible all the time. It just looks like you don't care about your work or your team. I once was told, because you're physically larger than most of the women here, you should speak about it so you don't seem so intimidating. I've been told, you shake hands like a man. I thought, your kind was supposed to be delicate. I never forget a face, especially when it's so exotic. And then, of course, the very, I'll just say typical, probably one of the most frequent is like, what are you exactly? You're not really American. There's been a lot. And what I would say is kind of like my quick replies and kind of ongoing expectation even of these statements doesn't refute the mental exhaustion it may cause me. Unfortunately, I refer to it as like psychological terrorism, right? It's not meant to hurt, but it's really kind of strategically put in a way that's like trying to break down the person that we and I say we just because I know there are a lot of people that have gone through this, have worked so diligently to become, right? And look, I'm not trying to negate the beautiful, moving, again, inspiring moments that we have with neighbors and colleagues and, managers, et cetera. But I do believe in being as candid and as transparent as possible about the culture in which aggressors cultivate in an effort to keep their power when they feel like they're losing.
Oh, thank you for that. And for sharing some of those examples of, the kinds of things that people say. I believe in ignorance. I mean, perhaps it's meant to be hurtful. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. Do you? I mean, do you have a sense of like the intent or the purpose of why people say some of those things?
Oh my goodness. Honestly, I don't really put it this way. All of us wake up, let's say, I think of, we were to compare ourselves to phones. Let's go about the phone case earlier. I'm going to keep it in the same. If each of us wake up, right, with 100% charge, you can get more rest this evening. You're not going to wake up with 125 tomorrow. Everyone starts to, have 100 when you wake up. So knowing that, my only job is to curate where I allocate my energy. And so if I put energy into figuring out why and the purpose and motivation for someone else's ignorance, I don't think that's a great use of my energy, right? So it is not my responsibility to figure out or hypothesize as to why someone is that the way they are and why they don't care about my being, why they're interested in harming me, whether it be mentally, spiritually, emotionally, or physically. That's not my role, because the more energy I put towards that, the less energy I put towards myself and those that do have a vested interest in my growth in my house, in my well-being.
Ah, well said. Thank you. I saw you react when I said that, and I wanted to double click on that. I'm glad I did because that was really helpful.
No, but I think that's a fair question. Honestly, every time I, either I'm in a meeting or do a public speaking, there's so many people, especially a lot of younger people that are starting their career or just leaving school, and that's probably the number one question I get. Like, how do you deal with someone else's X, Y, Z? How do I convince them that X? And I just say, you're only responsible for you. You cannot control. I mean, I always remind them. I said, look, this tough, this work around DE&I is very tough, right? But ignorance is very successful because it is one of the most inclusive mofos I've ever met. It just is. And so you cannot, fight against something that has been so successful, way more successful. And not to mention the longevity of that success has existed way before I was born. And so for me to take the onus of the responsibility that somehow I'm going to get rid of it, no, I could do my part 100%. But that's not I don't take on labor I don't get compensated for financially, spiritually, or emotionally.
That's it. So if there was ever a group with whom I would choose not to be associated, ignorance is one of them. I would prefer not to be in the group. So to help me with that, what are some of the language choices that you've heard people say that are indicators to you of, this is the kind of unsafe, battery draining kind of a person, because I think you could probably see it from a mile away.
Yeah, no. That's such a fantastic question. I appreciate, positioning it that way. So when I keep going back to the question that I had said earlier about like the "what are you" question, and for me, it's so funny. I remember one time someone asked me like, "What's the best answer for that question? Like, how can I answer that in a way?" And I'm like, I just want us, meaning anyone, however you identify, to get to a place where we actually don't feel forced or even feel the need to answer that question. So normally what I would do is ask people to articulate what they mean, right? So I say, well, what do you mean? I just kind of play down, what do you mean? And then they'll do this, you know what I mean? I'm like, no, what do you mean? And then they're like, you know what I mean? I said, oh, so you want me to directly answer a question you're not willing to directly ask? And they're like, well, and I said, well, because that directly asking is inappropriate, it's wrong, and it's insulting, but you still want me to answer it. I said, so if you're uncomfortable asking out loud, you're not going to be comfortable if I answer it out loud, right? And so you're willing to say it, like the onus again is on you. So some other things outside of kind of, asking people to, what I like to say, justify their identity. Another thing, it's funny, I recently was asked what makes the Philadelphia Latino community unique. That gave me a lot of insight into, I'll just say, that publication's thought process around this is because, the concept of what makes a particular community unique, continues to cultivate the idea that people are responsible for justifying their presence and their purpose, right? While other groups are afforded the luxury of being centered as the norm, right? I every day I wake up, I don't feel the need to explain why I or the community I identify with exists, right? So essentially asking someone, what makes this particular community unique, it's really actively othering them. I tell people all the time, and someone even asked me over this past few days, what do I do when I feel like I don't belong? And what do you do when people tell you that you don't, right? In their way. And I said, I don't want to confuse those 2 points. I think that someone can 100% feel like they don't belong. And when I say that it's okay, meaning if this shirt doesn't fit me, I don't have a horrible body. It just means the shirt doesn't fit me and I can get another one, right? That's fine. But I think that if there are people actively trying to make you feel not included, and again, being othered, that's very different. Either way, in either situation, you shouldn't personalize it as there being something wrong with you. And I think that's the part that people forget. That you yourself have power. You have power as well. And so for me, even growing up, you had mentioned to me, my mom, she really emphasized and taught us that each of us individually have our own power, and we have to walk in that every day. And so every time, again, you put energy to someone that is interested, that actually uses their power to try to remove yours, they don't have your best interest, and don't let them, right? So for me, that's a big part of my, the importance of language and how you speak to people. Because it all starts also with how you speak to yourself. And I don't think a lot of people speak very kindly to themselves.
That's an interesting thought as well. And I think for individuals listening who view themselves as generous and inclusive leaders and are actively aiming to cultivate a culture of belonging and inclusion, to be thoughtful about what are some of the ways that you might be centering, any form of community, be it whiteness or abilities or whatever it is, that you are challenging yourself to think about how am I phrasing this, and or even who am I getting inputs from to help me understand that I'm too narrow in the way in which I'm looking at this.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I think even for myself, one thing I know I'm actively working on for me right now is even when I come up, like as a person, I have to create a document, or a PowerPoint presentation, I have to remind myself, well, those who are considered, neurotypical can understand the materials I'm putting together, right? But those who are neurodiverse, they may not. And so I want to be sure that, because I work with people, I have the honor of working with people of all types of abilities. And I want to be sure that I'm inclusive of them, that even, making sure when you think about inclusivity, you're not just including, for diversity, diversity dimensions, so to speak, and then just saying, well, it's not my responsibility for the rest, right? And so for me, if I say I'm inclusive, I really have to diversify, funny enough, what that means and who that includes and what that's like, whether it be, gender, sexuality, religion, et cetera. And just also remember, and that's another thing, even when people say, they refer to even, I would say the biggest thing with language as well in this, when people talk about a diverse person, it's one of my biggest pet peeves on the planet, because it just implies that they're diverse, but this thing, this community, this person in the center is not. Every single person is diverse. And so when you're referring to diverse people, it's really code for, Black, brown, disabled, what have you. And so if you're referring to yourself as an inclusive leader, but still say, diverse people, you gotta, your language is not reflecting the intention.
My gosh. So helpful to be reminded of that. So going back to you in third grade, I'm picturing you in third grade and having this experience, and just because I think the part of the story that we maybe passed over is the practice, the way that you prepared for game day, where you were like, I'm going to get another opportunity, right? I think that there's something really powerful in that. And then also the part where how you responded to the Audacity statement. You didn't know what it was, but you kind of took it and ran with it and created your own mantra. I actually think there's some really rich life lessons in there, Tiffany, around just practicing, mastery in a way too. And then the, way that you saw what you were doing versus how someone else saw it. And it didn't take away really from what you wanted that to be, right? So could you just dig into that a little more?
It's interesting. It's funny you called out the word audacity, because it is one of my favorite words. And, I'm sure a lot of people would say that they associate the word audacity with, unfortunately, something very negative, right? Like, how dare they have the audacity to XYZ? It's seen as, to me, the strength and courage to do something that people don't prefer. Like, that's how audacity to me is viewed, right? But audacity is just simply having that, and how people apply it, whether or not you like it, that's not their issue, right? So you can't blame the audacity. That's just the direction in which it went. And so for me, I can bore you with stories all day. But I remember,
I'm just looking up the definition. I just looked up the definition of audacity, and it says a willingness to take bold risks. There you
yeah,
go.
we didn't
That's
say to, piss people off, to offend anyone. That's like, that,
To be offensive.
no, exactly. It's like just to irritate people. Like, no, we attach that to the end of it, but it's really just about like the so to speak, right? There's sometimes there even no word for it. But I remember, it's so funny. I always think that, the biggest luxury in life is having options. And so for me, I feel like a lot of my life is just researching what options I have, right? Because if I were to base all of my decisions in life based on what I currently know at this moment, that's very limiting. So I feel very responsible to like, what is it that I don't know? What are titles that I never thought I would have, right? If you told me 10 years ago when we met, hey, Tiffany, you're going to be working at a bank, I'd be like, oh, you're crazy. Guess what? And then now I'm in one of the world's largest banks, right? So you just never know where life is going to lead you. And I remember reaching out to a very senior leader during a trip. And when I say a trip, it was a vacation because I'm a crazy person. And when I go on vacation, if I'm someplace that's like not a beach, I will leverage the opportunity to connect with a random person while I'm there. You just never know. And so years ago, I happened to be going to Madrid. And I remember I was, working on something and I had the television on and there was a soccer game, football game. And it was, Barcelona versus another team that was inevitably going to lose. And I remember it was a big deal because Barcelona had just announced a new logo on their jersey. And I noticed it immediately because again, I'm a visual learner. And I thought, oh, that's weird. I'd never seen that logo. And the reason why it was really big, it was a Middle Eastern airline. And oftentimes people don't realize that rival teams will have rival sponsors, right? Rival sponsors at large. And so I thought, okay, if Barcelona has this logo, that means Real Madrid must have a new logo as well of the other big Middle Eastern airline. Sure enough, I looked it up, they did. And then a light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, that was someone's job, right? To secure that relationship. And so I started doing research online of who that person is. And I eventually found him. And he was the head of international sponsorship for Real Madrid, which is one of the most, if not the richest, sports clubs in the world. And we ended up meeting in person while I was in Madrid. And I remember we had an amazing meeting. We talked for like 2.5 hours. He was very generous with his time. I was kind of shocked. And of course, on the outside, I'm acting all cool, right? When he's giving me a tour of the, Bernabeu Stadium, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Down on the inside, I'm just like, oh. So anyway, at the end of this meeting, he said to me, I was really shocked, at your message and, what you wrote. And, I had to see who had the audacity to send me a message like that. That's why I agreed. Who had the audacity? And I just, mentally, I did this to me.
Success. Right.
Victory shall be mine. And honestly, I always think to myself, will I ever encounter something I'm not going to have the audacity to do? And I have yet to encounter that because oftentimes people who are constantly doubting themselves, we growing for people that don't. So I, choose chronic self-conviction or chronic self-doubt.
Love that. So we need not leave our listeners with any other takeaway tip other than to find your audacity. Like for you listeners to think, for Tiffany Tavarez, it's audacity. I'm going to just find ways, stretch what's possible and look for solutions to problems that seemingly no one else is really noticing these patterns and just being courageous and willing to take risks. So for our listeners to think, what is their version of that? Because I think that is a personalized thing.
Right.
Also the recognizing the impact of language. So for us to do a self-audit of, how are we expressing ourselves? Are we othering people unintentionally? How are we speaking to ourselves? Like that's a good starting place, right? That self-talk. And, for us to be thinking about how are we demonstrating, inclusive leadership and celebrating what's great about other individuals. What other takeaway tips would you have for our listeners, Tiffany?
Oh, that's such a great question. The only two that I can think of, one would be that, the audacity for me is not just about, taking advantage or getting to know or leveraging something that's external as much as it is about or running parallel to me also getting to know myself, right? I think that we assume, okay, this is who I am. This is my name. I know my early story. This is the job I have. This is what my family looks like. This is what food I like to eat. I think that when people fill out kind of their life resume, right, they feel like they don't have to get to know them anymore, get to know themselves anymore. And, I love being surprised by me. It's something that I may really enjoy or something I may find really moving or beautiful. But part of that is allowing yourself to be open to that, and I think when people say they fear the unknown, that's not just external, the things that are outside them. It's also fearing the parts of them that they know are probably in there, that they haven't explored, that they haven't considered or forgot about, right? It's so funny when some people talk about like the idea of like inner child. Yeah, I don't think that for me, I would give any advice to my inner child that would be different than the path I've taken. And when people say, what advice did you give to your younger self? I wouldn't say anything. I'm in close proximity.
They keep going.
Yeah, I'm in close proximity to who she is. And we have agreed on everything and the way we've moved forward. So they're not a separate person. If you do view them as a separate person, you have not done a good job of cultivating who they are, as well as shutting yourself out from other parts of you. I think there's that. And then the other thing would be, when, as again, having known each other a long time now, as I've been reminded, civic engagement and volunteerism is really important to me. And I get a lot of questions around, I would love to be on a board or a committee. What should I do? Where should I go, et cetera? And I think, again, that's great. And I applaud that. But it has really been eye-opening to me how much people actually have not identified what is it that they care about. And and I know that people kind of go, it bothers me that there is, not enough jobs, right, for everyone, or that, there is no major city in America where people, that live and survive on the minimum wage actually are able to afford housing in that city, or the fact that all, children in schools don't have access to a healthy meal or a safe environment, like these sorts of things. But I think part of getting to know yourself is also part of what is it that you really care about, that you would love to impact in some way, even if small. And I think that's a journey that a lot of people haven't taken, but yet they'll do the work to get the leadership role for something. And my thing is, if you see me lead something, it's not because I was trying to fulfill a title. It's because I really care about that thing. And whether or not I have that title, I would do it. That's right.
Yes. You wanted to personally invest your time, talent, and treasure in that thing so that
That's
you
right.
could be, yes. Yeah, that's one of the resources that I'm working on creating. I'd love your input on it, Tiffany, is around generosity strategy. How can we be, we have strategies for everything else, but we need one on how are we investing this precious, finite amount of time, talent, and treasure that we're given. So thank you so much for being a friend all these years and an inspiration. I so appreciate you and applaud you and just thank you for investing in this podcast.
Oh my goodness. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here. It is a gift. And, I think the fact that you have been so consistent with these messages is really, really remarkable. You haven't kind of moved away, whatever, like really hot or it's popular at the moment. You've been really consistent. And I think, consistency means that there's a strong foundation, and I appreciate your foundation.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to ROG, Return on Generosity Podcast. Please help us grow by subscribing and reviewing us on your favorite podcast player. And for more information, visit bridgebetween.com. We grow when we give.
우리는 나누면서 성숙합니다.
We grow when we give.
On rayonne quand on donne.
We grow when we give.